"Excuse me, sir. I think you're in our seats." The words came from Carmen Wilson, 11 years old, standing in the first-class aisle of Flight 892 with her boarding pass trembling slightly in her hand. Her twin sister Kelly stood beside her, both girls staring at seats 2A and 2B. Their seats. But there was a problem. A white businessman in an expensive tailored suit was sprawled across 2A, his leather briefcase claiming 2B like a territorial marker. He didn't even bother looking up from his phone. "Little girl, first class is for adults. Economy's that way." His voice dripped with dismissal. Casual, automatic, like he'd said it 1,000 times before. Kelly stepped forward, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "We have tickets for 2A and 2B. Can you please check yours?" That's when his wife looked up. Patricia Melbourne sat in 2C, applying lipstick with the kind of precision that suggested she'd done this exact routine on 100 flights before. She laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made several nearby passengers glance over. "Honey, those seats cost $4,000 each. I don't know who gave you those tickets, but someone made a mistake." The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone made a mistake. Not "let me check my ticket." Not "maybe we're in the wrong seats." Just the immediate assumption that two young black girls didn't belong in first class. Carmen's hand stopped trembling. She held up her boarding pass, her voice losing its softness. "No mistake, this is our seat." The man, Rollins Melbourne, finally looked up, his face hardened, jaw tightening as he took in the girls properly for the first time. His eyes narrowed. "Where are your parents?" The question landed like an accusation. Like they were lost children. Like they'd wandered into the wrong cabin by accident. Other passengers were watching now, some pretending not to, others openly staring. The cabin felt smaller, hotter. Carmen's jaw clenched. Her mother's words echoed in her head. "Be polite, be clear, but never let anyone make you small. That's none of your business. This is our seat." If you want to see what happens when someone underestimates the wrong children, make sure you're subscribed because this story takes a turn nobody on that plane saw coming. Hit that subscribe button right now. But here's the question viewers need to answer. Have you ever witnessed something like this? Someone being treated like they didn't belong just because of how they looked? Drop a comment below, because what happens next is going to make everyone rethink everything. This wasn't just a seating dispute. This was about to become a reckoning. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife when the flight attendant appeared. Her name was Jennifer Cardwell, and she had that practiced smile flight attendants wear like armor, bright, professional, ready to handle any situation. But the moment she saw Carmen and Kelly standing there, two young black girls in the first-class aisle, that smile started to fade. Not completely. Just enough that anyone paying attention would notice. Is there a problem here? Carmen took a breath. She'd been raised to be polite, to explain herself clearly, to give people the benefit of the doubt. So that's exactly what she did. She held up both boarding passes, hers and Kelly's, and explained the situation calmly. They had seats 2A and 2B. This man was sitting in their seats. Could she please help them? Jennifer barely glanced at the boarding passes. Her eyes skipped over them like they were junk mail. Instead, she turned to Rollins Melbourne with a tone that was entirely different, warmer, concerned. "Mr. Melbourne, are these young ladies bothering you?" Kelly's eyes went wide. She actually took a step back like she'd been physically pushed. Because that question, "Are these young ladies bothering you?" that question said everything. It said who Jennifer believed. It said whose comfort mattered. It said who belonged in first class and who didn't. Rollins leaned back in seat 2A, Carmen's seat, and smirked. Actually smirked. They're claiming they have first-class tickets. Obviously someone's confused. Someone's confused. Not "I might be in the wrong seat." Not "let me check my boarding pass." Just the absolute certainty that these two 11-year-old girls were the problem. Jennifer's entire tone shifted. She turned back to Carmen and Kelly, and suddenly she was talking to them like they were toddlers who'd wandered away from their parents at the grocery store. "Sweethearts, let me see those tickets. Sometimes the app glitches." "Sweethearts, the app glitches." Every word dripped with condescension, with the assumption that these children couldn't possibly understand how airline tickets worked. Carmen handed over the boarding passes. her voice still steady despite the humiliation building in her chest like pressure in a sealed container. She watched Jennifer study them. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10. The flight attendant was looking right at the seat numbers, 2A and 2B, printed clearly on both passes. And then Jennifer said the words that would change everything. These do say 2A and 2B, but Mr. Melbourne is a Platinum Elite member. There must have been a system error. I'm sure we can find you lovely seats in economy. Let that sink in for a moment. The tickets were correct, the seats were assigned, but because Rollins Melbourne was a Platinum Elite member, somehow that trumped everything. His status mattered more than their paid tickets. His comfort mattered more than their rights. Patricia Melbourne actually chuckled, and leaned toward her husband. Her voice was just loud enough for the girls to hear. Probably their first time on a plane. Other passengers were watching now. Some were pretending not to, suddenly very interested in their phones or the safety card in the seat pocket. But others were openly staring. A few had their phones out, recording. The moment was being captured from multiple angles, though nobody knew yet just how viral this footage would become. Kelly leaned close to her sister and whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "This isn't right." Carmen whispered back, her jaw tight. "I know, stay calm." But staying calm was getting harder by the second. Carmen's voice rose, louder now, clear enough for everyone in first class to hear. "Ma'am, with respect, we paid for these seats, we're not moving." And that's when Jennifer's professional mask cracked completely. Her smile vanished, her voice went cold and hard. "Young lady, I don't appreciate your tone. If you don't cooperate, I'll have to call security." There it was, the threat. Not let me sort this out. Not let me check with the gate agent, just straight to security. Because two 11-year-old girls asking to sit in their assigned seats was apparently a security threat. Rollins Melbourne leaned back even further in Carmen's seat, stretching out like he was settling in for a long, comfortable flight. He was enjoying this. Actually, enjoying watching these children squirm. Just get them off the plane. We have a schedule to keep. An elderly black woman sitting in 3C started to stand up. Her voice was firm, steady. "Excuse me, those girls have their boarding passes." Patricia Melbourne cut her off with 2 words, sharp as a knife. "Mind your business." The elderly woman froze, hurt flashing across her face. Then slowly she sat back down. But her hands were gripping the armrests so tight her knuckles had gone pale. Jennifer held up her hand, her voice taking on that fake calm tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while doing something completely unreasonable. "Everyone, please. Girls, last chance. Move to economy or I'm calling security." Carmen reached into her backpack. Kelly tensed beside her, fear creeping into her voice. "Carmen, what are you doing?" Carmen pulled out her phone, her hands completely steady now. "Calling Dad." Rollins Melbourne actually laughed. A big, booming laugh that said he thought this was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. "Oh, this should be good. Let me guess, he's a pilot? A lawyer?" The mockery in his voice was crystal clear. Whatever this little girl's father did, Rollins Melbourne was certain it didn't matter. Certain it wouldn't change a thing. Carmen didn't answer. She was already dialing. Jennifer's voice went sharp. "Put that phone away right now." But Carmen ignored her. The phone was at her ear. It rang once, then a deep male voice answered. "Carmen? Baby, are you okay?" And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Carmen's voice wavered. Just a little. Just enough to show that she was still a child, that she was scared, that she needed her father. "Dad, we're on the plane. They won't let us sit in our seats." 43-year-old Davies Wilson was in his corner office at Wilson Tech headquarters on the 38th floor of a building in San Francisco's financial district. He'd been reviewing documents for a board meeting, a fountain pen in his hand, when his daughter's call came through. The moment he heard her voice, the tremor in it, the fear underneath the brave front, he dropped the pen. It rolled across the mahogany desk and onto the floor. He didn't even notice. "What? Who won't let you? Where's the flight attendant?" Carmen's voice got louder, clear enough that everyone around her could hear. "She's right here. She says we have to move to economy even though we have first-class tickets." Jennifer reached for the phone, her patience completely gone now. "That's enough. Give me that." But Carmen stepped back, out of reach, and kept talking to her father. "Dad, a man is in our seat. He and his wife are saying we don't belong in first class." Davies Wilson's voice changed. It dropped lower, colder, into something that would have made anyone who knew him professionally take a step back. "Put the flight attendant on the phone. Now." Jennifer snatched the phone, irritation written all over her face. She was done with this. Done with these children and their drama. She had a flight to get off the ground. "Sir, I'm handling a situation here. Your daughters are being disruptive." Davies cut her off. "My name is Davies Wilson, CEO of Wilson Technologies. My daughters have first-class tickets that I personally purchased. Why are they not in their seats?" Jennifer's face went a shade paler. Just a shade. Because even she knew that name. Wilson Technologies. One of the biggest tech companies in the country. But she held firm. Because she'd been a flight attendant for 12 years, and she'd dealt with angry parents before. "Mr. Wilson, there's been a seating conflict. I'm trying to resolve it by offering them alternative accommodations." Davies's voice could have frozen water. "Alternative accommodations? They have assigned seats. 2A and 2B. Who is in those seats?" Jennifer glanced at Rollins Melbourne, and her voice got defensive. "Another passenger, but he's a platinum elite. I don't care if he's the president. Those are my daughter's seats. Remove him." Jennifer's voice hardened. She was done being pushed around by some parent on the phone. "Sir, I make the decisions on this aircraft." "Then you've made the wrong one. What's your name?" Jennifer hesitated for just a second. "Jennifer Cardwell." The sound of typing came through the phone. Davies was at his computer now, fingers flying across the keyboard. Jennifer Cardwell, and the passenger refusing to move? Rollins had been listening to this whole conversation, and now he waved his hand dismissively, his voice loud enough to carry through the phone. "Rollins Melbourne, and I'm not going anywhere." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a brief, deadly pause. "Rollins Melbourne? Melbourne Financial Group?" Rollins smiled. He actually smiled, thinking this was working in his favor. Thinking name recognition was about to save him. "That's right, so you understand." Davies' voice cut through like a blade. "I understand that you're in my daughter's seats and making racist assumptions about where they belong." The word racist landed in that first-class cabin like a bomb. Passengers shifted in their seats. Phones that had been half hidden were now openly recording. Patricia's voice went high and defensive. "Excuse me? We never said anything about race." Carmen took the phone back from Jennifer, who was too stunned to stop her. "Dad, the lady said we probably glitched the app. The man said first class is for adults. They told us economy is that way before even looking at our tickets." Davies' voice gentled slightly, but only when speaking to his daughter. "Are you recording this, baby?" Carmen looked at Kelly, who held up her phone, camera pointed directly at the Melbournes. "Kelly is." Roland's face flushed red. "This is absurd." But Davies Wilson wasn't done. Not even close. "Jennifer Cardwell, I'm going to say this once. If my daughters are not in their assigned seats in the next 2 minutes, I will ground that flight." Jennifer actually scoffed. Actually laughed, short and dismissive. "Sir, you can't ground a flight." "I can. And I will. I'm a 15% shareholder in Meridian Airlines. I'm also on the phone right now with your CEO, Matthew Hendricks. Would you like to speak with him?" The confidence drained from Jennifer's face like water from a bathtub. That's not necessary." A new voice came through the phone, tight with barely controlled fury. "Jennifer, this is Matthew Hendricks. Keep that plane on the ground. Do not allow it to taxi. Federal aviation authorities are being notified. Security is on the way. If you think this is intense now, just wait until you see what happens when security boards that plane. Hit that subscribe button because you do not want to miss what comes next." Jennifer's phone started buzzing in her pocket. Then Rollins' phone. Then Patricia's. All three of them reaching for their devices at the same time. All three of them seeing messages, calls, alerts flooding in. The elderly woman in 3C whispered, loud enough for several people to hear, "Oh my God, I know who Davies Wilson is." A businessman in 4A was frantically Googling on his phone, his eyes getting wider with every search result. Jennifer was shaking now, actually shaking, the phone trembling in her hand. "Mr. Hendricks, I was just trying to resolve a seating dispute." Matthew Hendricks' voice came through cold and final. By threatening to remove paying first-class passengers who happened to be black children, while allowing a white passenger to steal their seats? Rollins stood up, his voice rising. Now wait just a minute. But Davies Wilson's voice cut through everything, commanding and absolute. Sit down, Mr. Melbourne. You're not going anywhere. And just like that, the power in that cabin shifted completely. Because Rollins Melbourne and his wife Patricia, who moments ago had been so certain of their place in the world, so confident in their right to those seats, were suddenly realizing they'd made a catastrophic mistake. They'd underestimated two 11-year-old girls. And they were about to pay for it in ways they couldn't even begin to imagine. Here's my question for you. What would you have done in Carmen and Kelly's position? Would you have stayed calm like they did? Or would you have reacted differently? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear from every single one of you. Because this was just getting started. The businessman in seat 4A had been quietly Googling on his phone for the past 30 seconds. His eyes kept getting wider. His jaw had gone slack. And then he gasped, loud enough that several people turned to look at him. Holy, Davies Wilson is worth $12 billion. The words hung in the air for exactly 1 second before the whispers started. They rippled through first class like a wave, passenger to passenger, row to row. 12 billion? Did he say billion with a B? Someone else, a woman in 3D, her voice getting louder with recognition. Wilson Technologies? They make half the software the airlines use. Patricia Melbourne's perfectly manicured hand shot out and grabbed her husband's arm, her nails digging in hard enough to leave marks. Her voice was a desperate hiss. Did you know? Did you know who they were? Roland's voice was tight, defensive, but underneath it, there was something else now. Fear. How could I possibly? Carmen's voice cut through, quiet but sharp as glass. You didn't ask, you just assumed. And there it was. The truth laid bare in 6 words. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't check his own seat assignment. He didn't verify anything. He just looked at 2 young black girls and decided they didn't belong in first class. He assumed. And that assumption was about to cost him everything. Kelly's phone was still recording. Every word, every facial expression, every moment of this unraveling was being captured in high definition. Jennifer tried one more time, her voice cracking with desperation. Mr. Hendricks, perhaps if we all just calm down. But Matthew Hendricks wasn't interested in calming down. His voice came through that phone like steel. The plane is grounded, Jennifer. Clear the jetway. Security is boarding in 90 seconds. Then the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, and you could hear the confusion in it, the bewilderment of a pilot who'd been given orders he didn't understand. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate. Please remain seated. The groans started immediately. People throughout the cabin who'd been absorbed in their phones or their books, who had no idea what was happening in row 2, suddenly realized their flight was being delayed. A woman in 5B called out, irritation sharp in her voice. What's happening? Why are we going back? The elderly black woman in 3C had been silent for most of this, but now she stood up, and her voice carried through the entire first-class cabin, loud and clear and righteous. A man stole those girls' seats and said they belonged in economy. Now their father's shutting down the flight. Phones came out everywhere, not just a few. Everywhere. Passengers who'd missed the initial confrontation were now filming, trying to capture whatever was about to happen next. The cabin had become a documentary in real time. Patricia was still hissing at her husband, her composure completely shattered. Fix this right now. Rollins turned to Carmen, and his voice had changed. The arrogance was gone. Now he was trying to sound reasonable, apologetic, like a man who just realized he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Carmen didn't even look at him. She just stood there, phone in hand, staring straight ahead like he didn't exist. But Kelly did look at him, and when she spoke, her voice had a strength in it that shouldn't have been possible for an 11-year-old who'd just been through what she'd been through. You had your chance to be decent. You chose this. The plane door opened with a mechanical hiss. 4 TSA officers boarded first, their uniforms crisp, their expressions serious. Behind them came 2 people in dark suits, FBI agents, their badges visible on their belts. and behind them, a man in an expensive navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Matthew Hendricks, CEO of Meridian Airlines. The cabin went completely silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive, like the air before a thunderstorm. Matthew walked directly to row 2, his eyes locked on Rollins Melbourne and Jennifer Cardwell. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Mr. Melbourne, Miss Cardwell, with me now." Jennifer's voice broke, tears streaming down her face now. "Mr. Hendricks, I can explain." "In my office. Move." There was no room for argument in those 3 words. Jennifer stumbled into the aisle, her professional mask completely shattered. She looked like she wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor of the plane and never be seen again. One of the FBI agents, a woman with kind eyes and an FBI badge that identified her as Agent Cynthia Graham, knelt down beside Carmen and Kelly. Her voice was gentle, the kind of gentle that comes from someone who understands trauma. "Are you two okay?" Carmen nodded, but she was holding herself together with visible effort. Kelly's hands were shaking, trembling so hard she had to clasp them together to make them stop. Agent Graham's voice got even softer. "You did nothing wrong. You understand that?" And that's when Kelly's eyes filled with tears. Real tears, not the kind you can blink back. Her voice came out small and broken. "We just wanted to sit in our seats." The second FBI agent, Agent Matthew Stone, stood and addressed the entire cabin. "Everyone remain seated. We need statements from witnesses." Rollins was finally understanding the gravity of what was happening. You could see it on his face, the color draining, the reality setting in. "This is insane. It was a simple misunderstanding." Agent Stone turned to him and his voice was professional, but firm. "Sir, you refused to vacate a seat that wasn't yours and made discriminatory comments to minors. That's not a misunderstanding." Patricia started crying. Not the dignified tears of someone who's genuinely sorry, but the panicked tears of someone who realizes they've been caught. "We didn't mean anything by it." The elderly woman in 3C stood up again, and this time her voice shook with anger. "Yes, you did. I heard every word." Agent Graham took Carmen and Kelly aside to the galley. Away from the staring passengers and the chaos in the aisle, she pulled out a notepad, her pen ready. "Can you tell me what happened from the beginning?" Carmen's voice was steady again. She'd pulled herself together, found that core of strength her parents had spent 11 years building in her. "We boarded with Zone 1. Our tickets are first class, 2A and 2B. When we got to our row, that man was in 2A and his briefcase was in 2B. Kelly added, her voice still shaky but getting stronger. "We asked politely if he was in the wrong seat. He said first class was for adults and economy was that way." Agent Graham wrote everything down, her pen moving quickly across the page. "Did you show him your boarding passes?" Carmen nodded. "Yes. His wife said the seats cost $4,000 and someone made a mistake giving us those tickets." Kelly's voice got quieter but harder. "Like we couldn't afford them. Like we didn't belong." Agent Graham looked up from her notes. "And the flight attendant?" Carmen's voice hardened, ice forming over the hurt. "She asked if we were bothering him. She called us sweethearts and said the app must have glitched. She offered us seats in economy even though our tickets are valid." Kelly added, "She threatened to call security on us." Agent Graham's pen stopped moving. She looked at both girls, really looked at them. "But you had done nothing wrong." Both girls shook their heads. "Nothing. They'd done nothing except try to sit in their paid seats." Meanwhile, Agent Stone was moving through the cabin, interviewing other passengers. The elderly woman was first. They were polite, showed their tickets, and that man laughed at them. His wife too. The flight attendant took his side immediately. The businessman in 4A was practically bouncing in his seat. "I filmed some of it. Want to see?" And then other passengers started speaking up. Multiple people offering their phone videos, their witness statements, their recordings of what had happened. Agent Stone pulled out a business card. "Send those to this email address, all of you." In the jetway, away from the passengers and the cameras, Matthew Hendricks was facing down Rollins and Patricia Melbourne. His voice was controlled, but barely. "Did you or did you not refuse to move from seats that weren't yours?" Rollins tried to salvage something, anything. "I've been flying Meridian for 20 years. I'm Platinum Elite. There's always been flexibility with seating." Matthew's eyes narrowed. Flexibility? You mean you're used to being upgraded without asking? Rollins got defensive, puffing up. If a seat's empty. Those seats weren't empty. They were occupied by 2 paying passengers who boarded before you. Patricia's voice was desperate now, grasping at straws. We didn't know who their father was. Matthew Hendricks' voice dropped to something cold and final. And if their father was a janitor, would that make it acceptable? Silence. Neither of them had an answer for that. Because the answer was obvious, and it was ugly. Jennifer was crying openly now, mascara running down her face. I've never had a complaint. I've worked here for 12 years. Matthew pulled out his tablet, swiped a few times, and turned it toward her. You've had 6 complaints in the last 18 months. 4 involved seating disputes with passengers of color. All were dismissed by your supervisor. Jennifer went pale. I never. Your supervisor, Tom Brennan, is also being suspended pending investigation. Agent Graham approached the group, her expression professional. Mr. Hendricks, we need to speak with Mr. Melbourne formally. Rollins' voice went high and tight. I want my lawyer. Agent Stone stepped forward. That's your right. You're being investigated for violation of federal civil rights law, specifically intimidation and discrimination in a public accommodation. Back on the plane, the door opened again. And this time, Davies Wilson walked through it. He was tall, over 6 feet, with a commanding presence that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with confidence. His clothing was expensive but understated. This was a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Carmen and Kelly saw him and ran. They actually ran down the aisle and threw themselves into his arms like they were 5 years old, instead of 11. He knelt down right there in the aisle, gathering them both close, and his voice was thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Carmen was trying not to cry, trying to be strong. We did what you taught us. We stayed calm, we asked politely. Davies' voice cracked. You did everything right, baby. Everything. This is not your fault. And that's when Kelly broke down completely. Why do people hate us? We didn't do anything. Davies held her tighter, and when he spoke, his voice was steady, but you could hear the pain underneath it. Some people are taught to hate. They're small and scared, and they make themselves feel big by making others feel small. But you are not small. You understand me? You are brilliant and powerful, and you belong anywhere you choose to be. The cabin was silent. Every passenger was watching this moment, this father comforting his daughters after they'd been humiliated for no reason except the color of their skin. The elderly woman in 3C was wiping her eyes. Several other passengers were crying too. A businessman in 4D cleared his throat, stood up, and his voice was rough with shame. Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry, I watched it happen and I didn't say anything. I should have. Others murmured agreement. Multiple voices, all saying they should have spoken up. They should have done something. Davies looked up at them and nodded. Thank you for saying that. Outside the plane, news crews were gathering. Someone had leaked the story, probably one of the passengers who'd already uploaded their videos to social media. Reporters with cameras, satellite trucks, the full media circus. Davies' phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text, call after call, notifications piling up. Matthew Hendricks approached him, and his face was pale. Mr. Wilson, I cannot apologize enough. This is unconscionable. Davies stood, keeping one arm around each of his daughters. Your flight attendant profiled my daughters. Your system allowed a passenger to steal their seats based on their race. This isn't one person's failure, it's institutional. Matthew nodded. I understand. We're conducting a full review of our policies and training. Jennifer Cardwell is terminated effective immediately. So is her supervisor. Davies looked toward the jetway where Rollins was being questioned. And him? Lifetime ban from Meridian Airlines. We're cooperating fully with the FBI. Agent Graham approached, her phone in her hand. Mr. Wilson, the videos are already online. Millions of views in the last 20 minutes. Davies pulled out his own phone and started scrolling. Twitter was exploding. The hashtag Flight892 was trending nationally. Number 3, number 2, number 1. Videos everywhere. Roland saying, first class is for adults. Patricia laughing and saying probably their first time on a plane. Jennifer threatening to call security. The moment Carmen called her father. Davies' voice through the phone, commanding and powerful. Those are my daughter's seats. Remove him. The comments were coming in faster than anyone could read them. This is why we can't have nice things. Imagine being that racist to literal children. Davies Wilson is a legend for grounding that flight. I'm never flying Meridian again unless they fix this. Those girls showed more grace than I ever could have. Public opinion wasn't just on Carmen and Kelly's side. It was unanimous. Brutal. Unforgiving. Rollins Melbourne and Patricia Melbourne had made the mistake of underestimating two 11-year-old girls. They'd assumed, they'd been cruel, they'd been dismissive, and now the entire world was watching them pay for it. If you're not subscribed yet, you need to hit that button right now, because the fallout from this is about to get even more intense. These people have no idea how bad this is about to get for them. Here's my question for you. Do you think the punishment fits the crime? Or should there be even more consequences? Let me know in the comments below. Within an hour of Flight 892 being grounded, Rollins Melbourne's company issued a statement. It appeared on their website, on their social media, rushed out so fast you could practically smell the panic behind it. Rollins Melbourne has been placed on administrative leave, pending review of today's incident. Administrative leave. That corporate speak for we're hoping this blows over, but we need to look like we're doing something. But it didn't blow over. By the next morning, less than 24 hours after Rollins Melbourne told two 11-year-old girls that first class was for adults, Melbourne Financial Group issued a news statement. Rollins Melbourne is no longer with Melbourne Financial Group. No longer with. Not retired, not resigned. No longer with. He'd been fired from the company he'd built. The company that bore his name. Patricia Melbourne's social media went private within hours, but not before thousands of angry messages flooded her accounts. Screenshots were saved, comments were preserved, her perfectly curated Instagram life, the luxury vacations, the designer handbags, the wine-tasting photos, all of it became evidence of privilege that she'd weaponized against two children. Their faces were plastered across every major news outlet. Not flattering photos either. Screenshots from the videos, Rollins with that smirk on his face, Patricia laughing as she applied her lipstick. Frozen moments that captured exactly who they were in that moment. The headlines were brutal and unforgiving. Racist businessman steals children's seats on plane. Tech billionaire grounds flight after daughters face discrimination. FBI investigating civil rights violation on Meridian Airlines Flight 892. Every news channel covered it. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. It didn't matter what side of the political spectrum you were on. Everyone agreed that what happened on Flight 892 was wrong. Jennifer Cardwell tried to save herself. She posted a tearful apology video on social media, her eyes red and puffy, her voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake. I let my biases cloud my judgment. I am deeply sorry." The video got ratioed into oblivion. For every one person who showed sympathy, there were 100 who weren't buying it. The comments were merciless. "You threatened children. You picked a side before you knew the facts. Sorry you got caught. You had 6 other complaints. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern." Tom Brennan, her supervisor, the man who dismissed those 6 complaints over 18 months, was also fired. An internal investigation revealed he'd systematically dismissed complaints involving black passengers, creating a culture where people like Jennifer felt comfortable making the choices she made. Civil rights attorneys started calling Davies Wilson. Not just 1 or 2, dozens. They wanted to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of every passenger who'd been discriminated against on Meridian Airlines. Every person who'd been told their seat was wrong. Every person who'd been moved or removed or humiliated. Meridian Airlines stock dropped 4% in a single day. 4% doesn't sound like much until you realize that translated to hundreds of millions of dollars in lost value. Shareholders were furious. The board was in emergency meetings. The entire company was in crisis mode. All because of what happened to two 11-year-old girls in seats 2A and 2B. 3 days after Flight 892. In the Wilson family home in Pacific Heights, Carmen and Kelly were in their room, sitting on Kelly's bed with a laptop between them, scrolling through headlines. Their mother, Simone Wilson, 40 years old, elegant and fierce in equal measure, sat down beside them. She'd been watching them from the doorway, seeing the way they were holding themselves, tense, wound tight, trying to process something no child should have to process. How are you two really doing? Carmen didn't look up from the screen. Everyone at school knows. They treat us different now. Kelly added, her voice quiet. Some kids think we're heroes. Some think we got that man fired over nothing. Simone let the question sit there for a moment. And what do you think? Long silence. The kind of silence that's heavy with thought, with two young girls trying to figure out something complicated and painful. Carmen finally spoke. I think he did it to himself. We just wanted to sit down. Kelly's voice was softer, more vulnerable. I think I'm tired of being brave. I'm 11. I want to worry about math homework, not whether people think I belong somewhere. And that right there was the heartbreak of it. An 11-year-old girl saying she was tired of being brave, tired of having to prove her humanity, tired of being strong when she should have been allowed to just be a kid. Simone pulled them both close, her arms around their shoulders. You shouldn't have to, but you do, and I hate that. Your father hates that. Carmen looked up at her mother. Is Dad okay? He's been really quiet. Simone's voice got softer. He's angry, not at you, at a world that makes his daughters prove their worth in a plane seat. Davies appeared in the doorway. He'd been standing there listening, trying to figure out what to say. Can I talk to them? Simone kissed both girls' foreheads and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Davies sat down on the floor between their beds, cross-legged, the way he used to sit when they were little and he'd read them bedtime stories. I've been thinking about what to say to you, about what happened. Kelly looked at her father, and her voice was small. You don't have to say anything, Dad. You came. That's what matters. But Davies shook his head. No, I do. Because you did something extraordinary on that plane. Carmen frowned. We just called you. Davies leaned forward, his voice intense. You stood your ground. You didn't yell. You didn't cry. You asserted your right to be treated with respect. Do you know how hard that is? How rare? Both girls were silent, listening. I grounded that flight because I could, because I have power and money and access. But you grounded it with your dignity, with your refusal to accept being diminished. That's a different kind of power. That's the kind that changes things. Carmen's voice was hesitant. Does it feel like things are changing? Davies was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully, being honest. Not fast enough. But yes. Every time someone sees that video and realizes what happened to you was wrong, something shifts. Every time another little black girl sees you stand up for yourself, she learns she can too. Kelly asked the question they'd both been wondering. What happens now? To the man? To the flight attendant? Davies took a breath. The FBI is building a case. The Department of Justice is reviewing for civil rights violations. Meridian Airlines is settling a class action lawsuit that will change their policies. And that man? His career is over. His reputation is destroyed, not because of me, because of his own actions. Carmen asked quietly, and us? Davies smiled for the first time in 3 days. We're going to Disney World next week, first class, in our assigned seats, and we're going to have the time of our lives. 6 months later, the updates came in pieces, fragments of news stories that told the complete picture of what happened after Flight 92. Rollins Melbourne was facing federal charges for intimidation under civil rights law. Melbourne Financial Group, unable to survive the scandal and the mass exodus of clients who withdrew over $400 million, filed for bankruptcy. Patricia Melbourne filed for divorce, trying to distance herself from the wreckage of her husband's reputation. Jennifer Cardwell was working retail at a department store, unable to find employment anywhere in aviation. Her lawsuit against Meridian for wrongful termination was dismissed. The judge ruled that her actions constituted gross misconduct and violated company policy. Tom Brennan was unemployed and under investigation for systematic discrimination. His career in aviation was over. Meridian Airlines settled the class action lawsuit for $47 million. They implemented mandatory anti-bias training for all employees. They created a passenger advocacy board to review complaints and ensure fairness. And Davies Wilson joined that board of directors, using his influence to make sure real change happened. In a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., Carmen and Kelly Wilson, now 12 years old, sat at a table with microphones in front of them, facing the House Transportation Committee. Carmen read from a prepared statement, her voice clear and steady. "We didn't ask to be spokespeople. We just wanted to go to our grandmother's birthday party. But what happened to us happens every day to people who don't have our father's resources. That has to change." Kelly added, looking up from her own notes, "We're not special because our dad is rich. We're special because we're human beings who deserve respect. Every child does. Every person does." The committee gave them a standing ovation. Representatives from both parties, standing and applauding, two 12-year-old girls who'd had the courage to speak truth to power. In the gallery, Davies Wilson sat beside Simone, both of them crying as they watched their daughters change the world. 1 year after Flight 892, Carmen and Kelly boarded another Meridian flight. Same route, first class, seats 2A and 2B. But everything was different now. The flight attendant who greeted them was a young black woman named Michelle. Her smile was genuine, warm. "Miss Wilson and Miss Wilson, welcome aboard. Let me help you with your bags." Carmen smiled back. "Thank you, Michelle." They settled into their seats, the ones they'd paid for, the ones they deserved, and Kelly whispered to her sister, "Feels different this time." Carmen looked out the window as the plane began to taxi. "Because it is different. We made it different." And then, as the plane lifted off the ground, Carmen's voice, older now, reflecting back on that day, came as a voiceover. "People ask if I'm angry about what happened. I'm not. I'm determined. Determined that the next 11-year-old black girl who boards a plane won't have to call her father to claim her humanity. She'll just sit down, in her seat, the one she paid for, the one she deserves, and everyone will simply let her fly." The screen faded to black, and then text appeared. Carmen and Kelly Wilson continue to advocate for civil rights in transportation. The Melbourne Civil Rights Act, inspired by their story, passed Congress in 2024, strengthening protections for passengers facing discrimination. Davies Wilson donated $50 million to establish the Wilson Foundation for Youth Advocacy. Rollins Melbourne was convicted of federal civil rights violations and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Flight 892 eventually departed, 6 hours late, without the Melbournes. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that change is possible when people refuse to accept injustice, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories about courage, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right, these are the stories we need to keep telling. Here's my final question for you. What's one thing you can do in your own life to stand up against discrimination when you see it? Not someday. Not eventually. Right now. Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about how each of us can make a difference. Carmen and Kelly Wilson were just two 11-year-old girls who wanted to sit in their seats, but they became so much more than that. They became a symbol, a reminder, a call to action. They reminded us that dignity isn't given, it's claimed. And sometimes, claiming it changes everything. This was the story of Flight 892. The flight that was grounded because two children refused to accept being diminished. The flight that sparked a movement. The flight that proved that even when you're 11 years old and facing down a system designed to dismiss you, you have power. The power to stand firm. The power to speak truth. The power to change the world.